Right then. How's everyone doing? So, Strength Chat episode 29, and I've got another very special guest here. Today, I am joined by Kirke, former professional rugby player and now S&C coach at Leeds Rhinos, as well as the owner of Implexus Gym. How are you doing?
I'm not too bad, thanks, mate. I'm up in the morning, so I'm a little bit tired. So forgive the fed. But other than that, yeah, I'm all right.
Oh, good. So what have you been up to recently? What have you been working on? What have you been up to?
Training-wise, obviously, at the Rhinos at the moment, we've reached kind of a critical point of the season in terms of we've been destined to be in the middle eights. About the season, being about a change of coaching, all kinds of stuff. A lot going on that side of things. Gym's steady. The gym's steady away. We kind of we had a strongman comp a couple of months ago, which has stirred up a little bit of interest, I think. We've had a few more people come down since then. And I did my own strongman comp in Harrogate. I was going to pull out of it because of I tore my bicep.
Right.
Did it so in the end as well. We had a few lads do it from the gym. We all did pretty well, so it was good.
Good. What events were in the strongman contest then?
There was a yoke, which one of my best mates did it with me, and we were drawn first event head-to-head against each other. It was quite good. Added a little bit of extra spice to it. But yes, there was a yoke. There was the log press, which I'm terrible at, but their log was the diameter was a lot thinner.
Right. Okay.
The old shoulders. I've had a bank out on my right shoulder. It's been quite right since then. It doesn't like the log, but the thinner one was much better for me. So the log, there was a keg toss, which I put a video on Instagram because I think you can see in the video I'm the most confused bloke in strongman at that moment. I had no idea how to throw it. Because normally, most people are probably familiar with like the world's strongest man. They throw kegs over a bloody goalpost looking thing. It was meant to be like that, but this was for distance, so it was really odd.
Carpool. Do another strongman.
Yeah. And then finish with the classic Atlas stones. But one of the lads who trained here, they were onto whiskey barrels. He put the stone on, but he did it fine. He had a great time. But as he put it on, shattered the top of the whiskey barrel, which caused a few shenanigans for the event organizer. Always have a company.
So obviously, chatted there, mentioned that being obviously you work with the Rhinos, you've done a strongman competition, you've been a professional rugby player yourself. How has your training varied over the course of your career? If you like, have some things stayed the core things the same, or has it been going from one extreme to the other? Because a lot of people think if you're a rugby player, you train one way, if you're a strongman, you train another way. How has your training varied?
Over the years, I've tried pretty much everything training-wise. I actually used to get in a decent amount of bother as a player for doing extra stuff, especially with the kind of like development of social media. So if you were training with one of your mates and they put something on social media anywhere, you get seen doing it, and obviously they question what you're doing. And that's fine. As now my role's changed, I understand more why. Are you still there? Because my screen just changed.
Yeah, I'm still here. Yeah.
Cool. That's fine. That's cool. So yeah, obviously now that I'm on the other side of the fence, I understand why it's important to keep tabs on stuff. We've got a guy working with us now called Dan Weaving, Dr. Dan Weaving, and he's like probably one of the best people I've seen. It's probably worth you speaking to him, actually. He acute chronic training load, all that kind of stuff. He's the man with all that kind of stuff. So from our point of view, if they feel like they need to do more stuff, then let us know and we'll kind of give them productive stuff rather than just doing stuff kind of thing.
Yeah.
So like, because way back then, so I played for Leeds for 10 years. Before that, I was semi-pro. Got a bunch of injuries, went to uni. So the job that I'm doing now is actually kind of my dream job. I didn't think I would ever actually play full-time. So I think a lot of people have the perception that, oh, because you played, you kind of got the job because you played, which is, it's probably true in terms of getting a foot in the door. But equally, I did my degree before knowing anybody at Leeds, all that kind of stuff. Loved it, lived it. I've probably tried every single diet going, some successfully, some less so. I tried to do a low-carb pre-season, which was horrendous. And then training-wise, I'm kind of like, when you first start out, I was just happy to be there. And then the more and more I got into it, the more I thought, well, how can you optimize what we're doing? So how can I make myself the best player? Because I was never the most skillful player, the fittest player, the strongest player, or the fastest player. But I was thinking, if I can get all of those as high as I can get them, then I've got the most chance of being in the squad at the end of the week. So I started adding in bits and bats of my own training. Towards the back end of my career, kind of maybe not the last couple of years, but I probably peaked around 32, 33, that kind of age. I did actually start adding in some kind of like, I think people call it like modified strongman stuff these days. But by modifying it, I think it just essentially mean reduce the load a bit so it's not maximal, slightly more circular fashion. Because as you understand yourself, having done you with Carnegie for a while, haven't you?
Yeah.
So you understand the demands of rugby are pretty varied. Like, you've got a powerlifting background as well, so when you're doing powerlifting, you can focus on 3 lifts. But when you're playing a mixed conditioning sport like rugby, it's a momentum sport, so you've got to carry some mass. You've got to have a certain amount of strength, if not for robustness, for winning collision, etc. But then you've got to be fit. You've got to be able to repeat those efforts all the time. So it's a much more complex beast in terms of trying to make everything optimal. So I kind of started adding a bit of that in, and with pretty good success, because I was probably my biggest weakness was always my fitness. Yeah. But I wasn't good at, if I ran and ran and ran, I just broke down. Like, because most of us, we're always in massive extension. We're not great runners. So if you do too much running, you just end up with kind of like little attrition injuries. Nothing like major, but just like a back where you can't train as well the next day, all that kind of stuff. So I think mixing it up and the variety of it kind of keeps you, one, mentally fresh, and 2, adds in stuff that you might not be doing.
Yeah. So from gaining that experience of trying, varied training, varied nutrition, what would be your go-to if someone is a rugby player? Obviously, they've got rugby training specific to them. What would be your go-to if they wanted to add in a little bit extra, or if someone was a powerlifter and they wanted to, try something else? Have you found along the way any certain things that fit quite well?
I think obviously needs analysis is massive. Like, if you with a rugby player, like where is their weakness? Are they super powerful, super fast, but they can only do it once? In which case, adding in like repeat sprint ability work or getting them a better aerobic base is probably the way to go. And that's what happened with me. But then you get people on the opposite scale. Someone like, at the moment we've got a front row, Brad Singleton, he's fit as a fiddle. Like, he can run for days. But when he speaks to me, he's like, I need to concentrate on the strength sort of stuff. So that type of thing. We have obviously a powerlifters training here. And the thing that I see with them is they're almost scared of any aerobic stuff. Obviously, I think too much is made of the interference effect. So I understand that when you spoke to Josh Greenfield the other week. Yeah. So when you're working at that level and you're like competing for world records and whatever in a strength sport, you don't want to be doing much if anything that will interfere. But in terms of it helping with recovery, and helping your work capacity so that your first set's the same as your second set, same as your third set, same as your fourth set, it's definitely got a role in it. And I think people are scared of it. And I think people get scared of it way too early. If you're in your first couple of years of powerlifting, you've got that much headroom of strength that you can build that doing a little bit of work capacity stuff is not going to kind of interfere with your gains, if that makes sense.
I think sometimes as well, mentioning sort of about powerlifters' point of view, obviously we only ever do those 3 lifts, only squat, bench and deadlift. And I think sometimes if you go away from there, it's a different movement, a little bit like what you said about injury prevention. Think, I might injure myself. what are your thoughts on actually adding in different movement patterns for robustness and, you know, looking after your body? So at the end of the day, you've got to be strong for life. Like, you've only got a limited shelf life as a powerlifter. You've still got to be a day-to-day human, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, there's nothing wrong. I mean, you see a lot of really good lifters who lift with high frequency with the same movements and they have no issues. But then obviously not everyone is a perfect squatter. So over time, and that's why I think unless you're good at knowing when you need a deload, I think varying the movement, just a subtle variation. So not necessarily, I don't squat this week, but I do a different squat. Just so that your hip tightness, all that kind of stuff isn't as aggressive as doing, I don't know, say for example, if you back squat 3 times a week.
Yeah.
Just rotating it a little bit, especially kind of like, the other thing I was going to say as well about powerlifting, you don't see, with a good structured program, and you probably dish these out, I imagine, but like a good GPP phase, whereby you're doing strength stuff, but it's not related to what you're doing. We've got a lad at the moment training, he's actually doing a strongman comp out for a change, but he's not getting weaker. He said some of his lifts have actually got better because he's kind of accidentally stumbled across working on some weaknesses. But that's what comes with, like, for powerlifting, like with experience, I suppose, because in the first couple of years, you don't know what your weaknesses are really.
Yeah.
And it's easy these days to look on social media because it's a little snapshot of, fix your squat with this 2-second fix, which might work for a lot of people, but then you'll get outliers and people that it doesn't work for. So, like, coming to someone like yourself who's got good experience in powerlifting, or Josh, etc., if you want to go down that route, it's probably worthwhile, I would imagine.
Okay. So you mentioned a little bit before about, obviously, as rugby players trying out different training modalities and that sort of stuff. For anyone who is trying different stuff, who might be maybe not playing at sort of like Rhinos level, but still, you know, playing some sport, how does that affect your programming? And do you set the program out, right, this is what we're going to do, and then if they come to you, do you change the program that you originally set out, or do you change what they want to do outside of that program, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it does. Obviously, there's a big difference between being a full-time athlete and being, on the other extreme, like an amateur athlete. The full-time, you kind of expect him to do what you say. This is why I say, I know this will get you better, or I'm pretty confident it'll get you better.
Yeah.
So you've got to do it, kind of thing. Whereas on the other end of the scale, if you've got someone who does club training twice a week and plays on a weekend, but understands the need that weights will help make them more robust and potentially better at their sport, you've got to get a bit more of, what do you enjoy doing?
Right.
I'm not going to tell them to do a squat, for example, when it's uncomfortable for them, and they'd rather do a trap bar deadlift, when you can get a similar effect. Obviously, we do quite a few isometric stuff at the moment down at Leeds, which is easier to do with a squat or a single leg squat variation, as opposed to trap bar. Trap bar, you've got to hover above the ground. But if someone doesn't like doing it, they won't do it with their utmost ability. And if they're working as well, they've got a family, they might have a baby or something like that, then you've got to create buy-in in terms of, right, do you enjoy doing it? No. Right, well, we'll do something else, because there's always something else that you can do that'll still, it might not be the ideal, but it'll certainly give them a decent enough benefit for them to be worthwhile spending 40 minutes in the gym 2 or 3 times a week doing.
Okay. So just moving away from, well, staying on the topic of programming, a couple of weeks ago I actually sent you the research paper that I used. I can't remember what it was, what I was actually chatting about. But I sent you the paper for that. And obviously from the content you post out there, a lot of it is based on research that is out there, obviously trying to keep the training up to date. How much does science sort of and the research influence your training? Do you take some of it with a little bit of a pinch of salt, or is that, right, we'll try this, and then you take your own spin on it?
It's interesting, isn't it? In terms of my own stuff, you've got carte blanche. Like, it doesn't, now that I'm at the stage I am, just an old sod, you can do whatever you want. But I think I'm fortunate in terms of I'm still young enough to be able to relate what I'm doing. So what I'll do is like you say, read a paper. I've read a recent one about hypoxic repeat sprint training. I'll do it. And if I feel that it's kind of like applicable to what we're doing, I mean, the study was actually in rugby players anyway, so you'd imagine like the validity is pretty good. And it's been a similar effect's been seen in swimmers, all that kind of stuff. So I'll do it, one, because I enjoy trying it, and then see how you feel. If it doesn't break me, usually it does these days. If it doesn't break me, then obviously you can then consider giving it to your squad. But bearing in mind that we get very, very limited time with them, especially in season. Obviously, in terms of specificity, their field sessions are the highest. So as you come down the list, gym's pretty much, it's not far off the bottom in terms of priority what they do on a weekly basis. I think there's a misconception in terms of like, oh, they must train weights 5 times a week or whatever. We probably get 2 sessions in. And that depends on the fixture turnarounds. If it's like a Friday fixture, we'll get 2 weights days. And obviously one of those is game day -2. So the stuff you've got that you can do is limited. You obviously don't want them to go into a game feeling particularly sore or anything like that. Or like the paper you sent me was from memory about neuromuscular CNS fatigue. You don't want to smash into bits on a Wednesday when they've got a game Friday. So you don't want them to have that hangover, because you'll know yourself. You can lift a couple of heavy singles. You wake up, you've got no soreness, but you're flat. And it's because of what you've trained before, not necessarily even that day. It's an accumulative effect on your CNS rather than that one-off session. Because you see quite a few people coming in, oh, I've got a squat RP9 today. I'm so tired tomorrow. I'm like, not if that's the only thing you're doing this week. If you've done a load of stuff, then there's a bit of a misconception that like a high intensity lift will smash your CNS to bits. It's more, I think the recent stuff is more about the volume added onto that. So obviously, game day wise, the volume 2 days before a game is very low. It's also very light as well at the moment. But then within the season, we go through peaking phases and all that kind of stuff. So some days they'll feel like they're doing nothing, and it's a hard thing to get them to buy into, because you want them to feel fresher.
How do you go about explaining that then? Because sometimes, people will come in and they'll want to smash it all the time. They want to be like, like powerlifters will be coming in and be like, let's work up to really heavy singles all the time. I can imagine, maybe rugby players might come in and be like, I want to do this, I want to do that. And there's a little bit of sort of the bro science, if you like, of do this to chase the gains, but there's actually the real science behind it as to why. How do you go about explaining that and finding that balance?
Do you know what, the squad we've got at the moment is brilliant in terms of the lead stuff, because they ask questions, and one is good for me because I have to justify myself. So I have to make sure I'm not making it up. If then on top of that, so say for example Wednesday this week was super light, we did a few singles of squat jumps, that kind of stuff. If at the end of that they're like, I understand why we're doing this, but still I feel like I've not done anything, we'll give them a few kind of bodybuilding-esque pumpy exercises, like arms, that kind of stuff, almost feel good exercises, because for them obviously we need to get them to go into a game with a good mental state as much as a good physical state. Because it's how, as you know yourself, it's half the battle. The placebo's half the battle. So if they go into the game, they're physically sweet, but they don't feel like they've done enough, it can affect their game. So give them a couple of like arm exercises. It's not going to tire them out. There's no like carryover of fatigue, CNS, neuromuscular, or otherwise. But they feel like they've done something in that session. So these days, you do quite a lot of so they might have 3 or 4 singles of squat jumps coupled with some plyos, that kind of ballistic exercise. And at the end, I'll put a time cap in and I'll say, right, you've got 5 minutes where you can do X amount of chins and X amount of press-ups, for example, in a circuit style. Just so they go in feeling mentally sweet. The powerlifters we've got, they're pretty good. Do you know what? A lot of them have got their own coaches anyway. But it is interesting speaking to them. I've been using HRV for probably, I forgot what year it was then. Since about 2012. So I've got my own, only on myself. We've started using it a little bit at Leeds, but so I've got 6 years of data on my own stuff, and it's really interesting to see trends in that. So in some of the powerlifters here are so interested in stuff like that because they've come from usually just a recreational training background, and then see that they've enjoyed it and kind of buy into it. But they're all very interested. It's good.
Yeah.
Like,
so on sort of, we mentioned there about the research papers that we've looked at. Is there any sort of platforms that you would recommend? Anything that you think, yeah, that one, if it could come out of that journal or come out of that person that sent that out, that's 9 times out of 10 that'll probably work? Or have you found, because you find some people, they'll come in and if they're asking you questions, usually they've read something somewhere and being like, is this right? What are your sort of go-to?
For what population?
A little bit of mixture of both.
Okay. The thing I've had a lot of success with recently is, Dr. Yes's kind of GPP 1x20 program.
Okay.
It's really good in terms of, if I'll probably use it as long as I've still got a job in the off season at Leeds next year.
Yeah.
I've done it with a few. Obviously, what happens as well, we've had loads of them this year. We've got loads of injuries. It kind of gives you a bit of a platform in which to trial things with people.
Yeah.
So, for example, last year we had a few long-term injuries. So we've got the Dave Wilson, who's the assistant S&C. We kind of put together some triphasic stuff, like Chaldees. Gave that to some of the injured players last year and ended up using that in pre-season this year. Similar to this year, we've had, at one point, I think we had 13 out of the top 20 people who didn't train on a Monday. We've had that many injuries.
Yeah.
So we kind of long-term injuries, like Cal Watkins, obviously his ACL, he won't be back playing until beginning of next season.
Right.
So, but upper body wise, we can experiment a bit with what he's doing. We kind of give him a yesish phase, and they get some good buy-in, especially because some of these lads, you've got to remember as well, have been playing 10, 15 years. They've seen a lot of stuff. So in terms of creating buy-in to the program, if it can be a little bit different somehow, then it's just new to them. It might not necessarily be that program's any better than another program, but because it's changed and it's something different to what they've been doing before, they enjoy it a little bit more, you get more buy-in.
Yeah. I sometimes find that, I don't know whether you find this as well, but blending everything that you've read together and, not all of that, because I've used the triphasic stuff before, but then adding in other things to it. Would you recommend people to go out there for the general population, for potentially people who are playing sport who want to go off and try something else, read something and then blend it a little bit together, or try doing the
Definitely, especially because the stuff like the triphasic stuff came out of the back of kind of like American sports, American football, all the other kind of stuff, which isn't obviously perfectly replicated in what we do. So all the kind of triphasic stuff we've done has been adapted for rugby and adapted for the schedule as well, because obviously what the head coach says goes. So if he says, right, today, Ian, you've got 30 minutes to do weights. Well, if you took kind of a snapshot of a triphasic program from Chaldees' book, you're not going to do it in 30 minutes. So obviously you've got to kind of prioritize stuff. And it might be that 1 week they'll can weights. They might be like, right, we're not doing this today. We've got a sponsors day. So you kind of have to be pragmatic in terms of, you might, like I set out the full season week, as soon as the fixtures are released, write a very basic skeleton for the year. But then week by week that'll change because our schedule changes. And obviously the fixture turnarounds, and they'll decide what day they want to train that week, what day they want to have off that week. And that does change, it's never fixed. And then even within that day-to-day, I'll arrive there at 7 in. You've got a list as long as your arm of injuries, and they all need adapting. So well, you might get someone who can't do any plyometric exercises for 2 weeks. So you wouldn't then throw them back straight into doing what the other guys have been doing that have got a good base in that. You've got to then obviously scale them back in. So it's always fluid, it's always changing, and that's what I would recommend for people if they're going to go out and do it on their own. Don't think you have to do exactly what's written on someone else's program, because that's not for you. That's not written for you. Yeah. So like you're saying, kind of if you think, oh well, that works for me, but I'd like to try this, keep a little bit of both. I think it's Derek Hansen at the moment. He talks a lot about microdosing. It's just using little bits and bats of everything.
Yeah. Yeah, that's quite good that. I mean, because then it keeps people interested as well, thinking about that, adding some.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Because for me, it's been said a million times before, but the world's best program done with an ounce of enthusiasm won't be as good as an average program with 100% buy-in.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not always yeah, that's a good point. Just on terms of sticking with sort of the science type of things. Obviously, you've been using, is it the G Flight that you've been using for?
Yeah.
So that's a good little bit of kit that is really, everyone thinks that, you know, oh, you'll have to go up to the uni and use a force plate or something like that. There's an app that I use called, I think it's called Iron Path, which tracks, tracks obviously the bar path.
Yep.
How do you, because actually they're not that, it just gives you a little bit of feedback on your training. Would you recommend people using that, and does that improve their people's training, or does it just give you an idea of how they're getting on?
100%. Obviously, because we have a decent time with the unit, so we can get hold of stuff. But it's a case of kind of like the guys who I work with going to the uni, signing it out. It's a bit of a logistical nightmare. So the G Flight, I bought it to use in Implexus, really. Yeah. But I've actually ended up using it down there quite a bit. In terms of the feedback, what you're saying there is bob on. So it's probably easy to explain velocity. So I've got a few linear transducers, you know, the open barbell ones. I also bought 3 of those. But one of the guys was coming up to his first powerlifting meet. He was doing sets of 5. And I was like, mate, after your 3rd rep, you're slowing down. And he couldn't tell. He was like, nah, I'm not. He was quite a confident guy. He's a funny fella. No, I'm not. Sweet. I was like, well, we can measure it. And if you can keep your speed after your 3rd rep, sweet, crack on. But if not, either do more sets of 3 or just can the extra 2 reps, because there's no point in lifting them. You're basically grinding them. So we put the transducer on there, measured the speed, and there was a massive drop-off after the 3rd rep. And for him to see that, it's like the penny drops, and he's like, oh, right, yeah. Finished up his session, then that sort of feedback. And in terms of like the feedback, we do quite a lot of stuff with fatigue drop-offs or percentage fatigue drop-off on the watt bikes, and we've started using it with plyometric type stuff as well. So kind of like if they're doing contrast training, like they might do a couple of squats into a couple of jumps, we're measuring the ground contact time. Usually that's the easiest way to do it with a G Flight. Once they drop beyond a certain point, their session's done. And in terms of like the lads down at the Rhinos and people here, one, I think it makes them try a bit harder because they obviously don't want to drop off.
Yeah.
But 2, they're getting the feedback. They love looking at the numbers afterwards and going, oh, did I get this? Comparing themselves to each other as well. Yeah. I think you get a lot of, I don't think buy-in is the right term, but it's almost like friendly competition. They're just kind of like, oh, how high did you manage to jump? X, all right, I'll try and beat that next time. And it's really good. It's like, it just adds a bit, like we were saying before, keeps them interested in the program rather than, oh, we did this last week. Yeah, you did, but this week is competitive. Yeah. It definitely adds another element. And obviously the feedback that we were talking about, the bar velocity, is definitely useful. And especially because it's become more affordable. There used to be, what's the really expensive one? Linear transducer before, they're about $1,000 each. I think these were like $250, $300, something like that. So it's kind of bringing things very much affordable for people. Yeah. So it's not an unusual amount to spend. I know like someone will spend 170 quid on SBD belt. Well, you could get a transducer for that. And you could use that instead of RPE. So you can say, right, well, today I'm going to hit singles at 1 meter per second until I can't do it anymore. And whatever weight that is, that's the weight that's on the bar.
Yeah. I think
he has brought it's good.
Yeah, I think it's just training a little bit smarter. 'Cause it's a little bit, mentioning that the powerlifting guy, did 3 reps and then the last 2 reps are grinding out. It's just sort of maybe that old school bro science mentality of, yeah, let's go balls out, let's get that stuff done. Is there any apps or pieces of equipment that you would recommend that are sort of like, yeah, if you were going to get these would help your training?
I very much use the HRV for training app, especially if you've got like obviously a smartphone. It uses the light on the back rather than a heart rate monitor. I did use Athlete, where you had to have a heart rate belt on. So if you forgot to wear the belt, if you forgot to take it work, because you should take it at the same time every day. Yeah. It just makes it very usable. My only issue with that would be careful how you translate the data, because sometimes something will change. I don't know, just as simple as maybe you walked upstairs and then took the measurement. So you obviously it changes your heart rate to where it would normally be. So therefore, it gives you a score. It's the RMSSD that it measures, but it gives you a recovery point score. It might say actually, today you're not very fresh, but actually I just walked upstairs, so my heart rate's higher than it would be because of that, not because I'm particularly fatigued. But it's definitely, if you can be consistent with it, it's pretty cheap. I can't remember how much it costs, but it's less than a tenner. And it's just a good way of monitoring your training load. And you can do kind of correlations, I believe, is between kind of like, you can actually add questions in there. So one of mine is, I have a bit of a coffee problem. How many coffees did I have the day previous? And obviously, over time, you can see the correlation between how many coffees you had and your HRV the day after, all that kind of stuff. Alcohol is another good one. I think that's on there as standard, but it's a good one to kind of, for most people, to kind of measure.
I think when you said about training volume, that is one thing where I find that people, just going back to general populace, like add too much in, and then if their volume's always really, really high, then all of a sudden, I think that's only got a limited shelf life, and then they'll just burn out. One thing that just from especially from my own training, how do you monitor sort of like the training volume and the stress on the body and that sort of stuff? How do you monitor that?
On an ideal, obviously, I'd use it in an ideal situation. Probably use HRV as your kind of objective measure. If you can do some type of standardized jump before training, just to get an idea of where you are, kind of neuromuscularly and fatigue-wise and whatever, it's pretty easy to do. I think it was Kirke Wenham Flat who did. I think he had a kind of shoestring budget when he did Argentina. He just used a broad jump just to see how people were that day. The only thing you'll find with that, if there's a lot of repetition, people's state of mind going into the jump is very important. You've really got to make sure they're kind of maxing out that jump every time they do it. Because if they're going thinking, same old jump, that's going to affect the result rather than their actual physical state, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But a simple jump, like if you can do it for height sweep, so if you had a G flight, great. Or a broad jump, measure your broad jump. If you're way off that day, chop the volume down, or go home, have a lie down in the sauna. But I was speaking to one of the really good powerlifters we've got here, Mike Jones. He squats over 300, etc. Like so, some silly weights. And we were talking about volume and frequency, and it's the idea of, I get excited with it. I do too much volume because I like training. Not everybody does, but obviously I like to do it. Yeah. So if anything, I've always gone overboard with volume. But the discussion we had, I think it was yesterday, was simply, if you're progressing at low volume, why do high volume? Because at some point, you'll plateau anyway, and you'll have to add something in, whether that's volume or frequency, and frequency usually means you do more volume anyway. So if you can, it's minimum effective dose. If you're getting better at low volume, or if you're getting better at squatting once a week, why do twice a week? Yes, it might be better, But at some point you'll slow down on once a week, and then you can add it in, and then you do better.
Yeah.
So it's just so easy to get excited about it and get too much of a good thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think, from my point of view, when I see people coming in the gym, everyone thinks that more is always better. I'm like, yeah, let's do 6 days a week. And it's like, well, when are you gonna chill out a little bit? Why do you need to do 6 days a week? What's the point of it? I always think there needs to be a little bit like when you're chatting about actual training. You've got to train for a purpose. You're doing it for a reason rather than just doing it for the sake of it. So just to sort of round off then, what advice would you give people listening if they wanted to add a little bit of science, if you like, a bit of reasoning into their training, whether that be using apps, going out and finding research, and just training a little bit smarter?
Yeah, I can recommend using the HRV stuff in terms of for any kind of athlete. I think it works slightly better in aerobic athletes. So if you're on your kind of team sport end or individual sport end, but more aerobic end, I think it works more consistently with that. If your sport is more lifting based, powerlifting, strongman, whatever, somehow track your volume and track how you feel each day. So if over time your volume's the same, but you're becoming more and more fatigued, you're probably doing too much. Yeah. So you just need some way. So your daily kilos is probably like a super basic way of doing it. So if you're squatting and benching that day, sets times reps times weight, record how you feel the next day. Next time you do it, the same. So over time, if it starts to drop off, then either you need a deload or you're doing too much volume.
Yeah. I think going with that, you can't keep going up and up and up. Sometimes, it's like that. The standard graph that you see. You go up a little bit, drop down a little deload, and you go back up again. I
think a lot of that stuff comes with experience as well. There's a kind of like a. I think social media makes it worse in some ways because people see so many. It's so easy to see what other people are doing, and thinking that that's for you. Like when you first start lifting, you might be like 8 months in, and you think, "Oh, well, I better do that," but you don't know. You haven't done enough of it to know how you feel yet. If that makes sense. Like a lot of the go back like RPEs. People in the first year of lifting use RPEs. I would put money on them getting it wrong.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
When that's no disrespect to them, they've just not done it for long enough. That's all. Yeah. Like you wouldn't, I don't know. A GP in his first year I imagine would make some mistakes because they haven't seen enough diseases. Almost like it's probably a poor analogy, but you haven't got enough training hours under your belt. You can't have in that amount of time.
Yeah. I'm still trying to figure out the RPE system. You've got to monitor it. I mean, I was supposed to hit an RPE 8 the other day, and it was about 12. I was like, whew, I've overshot this a little bit. But I think a lot of people forget that sometimes to start seeing. I'm there, still here. Sometimes people think, just come in and just do whatever. But that's why I recommend to people, like what you said, record your training, record how you feel, and the results and the benefits will come. So a nice way to round off really. So I found that really interesting. There's a couple of my own questions that I threw in there just to sort of see your opinion on it. So if people are interested in coming down and training down at Implexus or asking any questions, where can people find you?
At the gym usually. So Implexus in Armley. You can find me an email on social media as well. My email address ian@implexusgym.com. It'd be good to actually. I'll have to come down to your the enemy.
Definitely more than welcome anytime. So thanks a lot for taking the time to chat with me. Thanks to everyone who's listening, and I will see you next week.